Hello, I'm Earl Taylor, Chief Marketing Officer at the Marketing Science Institute. As many of you know, nonprofit MSI serves as the bridge between marketing theory and business practice, and our goal is to move the needle on significant marketing problems. We do this by funding research by leading academics worldwide on topics voted by our corporate sponsors and disseminating that research through members-only events and a variety of publications. I'm very pleased to welcome you to another MSI For Members by Members webinar. This is a series of webinars on subjects related to MSI's current research priority topics. First, I'd like to point out the Chat with Presenter function on the left-hand corner of your screen. Please use this feature to send through any questions you have for Michael or Jim during the presentation. We'll gather the questions and have a brief Q&A session following the presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce you to today's featured speakers. Michael Cohen is Convertro's Head of Data Science and Analytics. In this role, he oversees continuous development of Convertro's data science framework as well as solutions state-of-the-art reporting capabilities. Michael's a predictive data scientist, engineer, and scholar with expertise in digital media, e-commerce, CPG, competitive strategy, and pricing. Before Convertro, Michael was the CTO of a marketing analytics consultancy and a professor at the NYU Stern School of Business and the University of Connecticut. He has a PhD from the University of Connecticut in quantitative marketing and econometrics. Jim Spaeth is partner at Sequent Partners, which he co-founded over 13 years ago. And during that time, he's consulted on media and brand metrics for many of the country's foremost media associations and marketers. He also founded USA Touchpoints, the cross-platform consumer journey measurement system that was developed by Sequent Partners. And prior to that, as many of you may know, he was president of the Advertising Research Foundation for 7 years, really focusing their efforts on the research industry and measurement. And he is co-author of Market Research Matters, among numerous articles, has served on boards of a number of industry associations, and has an MS in econometrics and a PhD in economics. So there are no two people better qualified to share with us today best practices in marketing ROI performance management. So Michael and Jim, take it away.
Thank you, Earl. That was a nice introduction. Michael and I are excited to be with you here today. Let me start by saying we're going to provide I'm going to provide the sort of the broad industry view, and then Michael will give you a specific look into what they're doing at Convertro, and I think that's a nice pairing. There we go. I want to first start by acknowledging CIM, the Coalition for Innovative Media Measurement, and the 4As, I'm sure you all know, the Association of American Advertising Agencies. They sponsored this work and then also supported it with their intellectual contributions as well in terms of keeping us guided on the issues that were most important to the industry. Attribution has become an increasingly important topic these days as it moves from digital to encompass more and more of the marketing mix. And there's good reason for that. You know, you have to start by thinking first about the more traditional measurement of marketplace performance, and that's marketing mix modeling, or MMM as we've abbreviated it here. And market mix modeling has been around commercially since 1989. It practiced by academics and in a few pockets of the commercial world for probably a decade or so before that, to my knowledge anyway. And, you know, it answered that question, what do I get from my marketing dollars? And which, if you go back far enough, that was an unanswered question and a real perplexing one for business people. And it has become a very, very successful and highly adopted and utilized technology. Most major companies today use market mix modeling to one degree or another to understand the ROI of their various marketing investments. I'm sure that's not news to anyone on this call. What's been happening more recently is coming out of the digital world where you have a different view of things. So not looking at things at a market level, but looking at things at an individual person, household, device, or transaction level. Attribution attempts to understand the contribution of different elements to that specific transaction. So importantly, as we'll call it, a conversion transaction, a sale, a website visit, a retail store visit, something of that sort that aligns with the marketer's objectives. Early on, attribution was very, very narrowly focused. Most recently, I would say from what we've seen of the industry, attribution is focused broadly throughout the entire digital ecosystem. But even that's not quite enough. And what we're seeing beginning to happen now is the embracing of the entire marketing mix and beyond into an attribution framework. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So why would this be important? One of the ways we tend to characterize marketing mix modeling versus attribution is that marketing mix modeling measures the ROI of marketing. Attribution modeling promises to give us the tools to manage the ROI of marketing and through that the ability to improve it, not just measure it historically, here's what happened, but to actually be able to make changes in the moment and change those outcomes for the better. In fact, we picked up this expression from Michael, the currency of impact, because if you think about the media world, the currency in media world is audiences. It's how many messages were delivered. Okay, well that's great, that's important, that's something, but wouldn't we all rather know what was achieved by those messages? So what was the impact? And the science of attribution promises to move us in that direction. So we think that's very, very exciting. We think it's a big dream. It's a major next plateau for marketing science to achieve. And in order to do that, you need more than the data. You need more than the models. You need results linked directly to DMPs, to buying and selling platforms, so that they can, here I'm doing air quotes, in the moment, however that might be defined, they need to be able to change the tactical decision making, and again, as I said before, for the better. So that's a bridge of epic proportions. That really promises that the data science and the analytics will have the opportunity to successfully, positively modify marketing outcomes. That's a bridge of epic proportions. And when you think about it, there's a reason we chose this bridge metaphor. It goes beyond linking strategy and tactics. It goes beyond linking digital to traditional media. It goes beyond linking online and offline outcomes. It links them all. And when you think about bridges, they have a lot of issues from the very beginning. There's a site plan that's got to work. The bridge has to be stable. It has to have the right scale. Aesthetics are important. The utility, the construction. So there's a lot that goes into building a bridge that's going to serve its purpose and that's going to stand up under all of the the situations that it will encounter. And the ROI bridge is really no different. One of our favorite quotes in our study, I must use this every day, is that we're on year 2 of a 5-year journey. This bridge is under construction, and that has to be understood. It's a bridge of tremendous promise and potential, but it is definitely under construction. And as we look at that construction, we also have to think about the utility of the bridge and its supports and its design and its materials. And we'll come back to each one of those things in just a moment. To put this in perspective, today there are actually 2 bridges being built by different parts of the industry. So on the left, we have integrated marketing mix models with digital attribution embedded within that. This is sort of let's take a little baby step into the future, and I'm not saying that in a derogatory way at all. It's a pretty safe way to try to ameliorate some of the risk. Market mix modeling, as I said earlier, has been around for a long time, tested, trusted, a good way to gauge the return on investment, the relative contribution of different parts of the marketing plan. And with that level of trust comes the potential to, let's say, put a governor on digital attribution. There are issues, and we'll go into those in a few moments, with digital attribution alone. And by connecting it, or say framing it using mix modeling as the guardrails, whatever metaphor you like, you can keep digital attribution from going too far off. Now that also limits it and limits its potential. The braver souls, and my co-presenter Michael is one of those braver souls, are building out digital attribution to be cross-platform attribution, meaning all the media, and beyond that to the rest of the marketing plan and everything that influences the consumer. So this is more of a future-focused vision, harder, more to do, but offers the same kind of potential that attribution provides in the digital world to the rest of the marketing plan. So it's a bolder vision, and we think very, very exciting. When you think about, and I'm sorry I changed my metaphors here, cross-channel attribution or cross-platform attribution, same thing, there are 4 issues that I want to focus in the next few minutes. One of them is, this operates at the individual level, individual persons, households, devices, transactions, and that means a whole new kind of data, unbiased and precise data at the persons and household level. That's a challenge. These data streams, because they don't come out of a single unified panel, need to be linked up. They need to be matched, again, at that person's household or device level. That's a challenge. The modeling techniques, in many cases, are quite different from the techniques that we've been using for the past several decades in mixed modeling. In some cases, they're related. In some cases, they're completely new. So quite challenging there as well. And then, beyond that, beyond the data and the analytics, it's how do you use these techniques to drive the outcomes you're looking for, more productive, more efficient marketing outcomes, better marketing ROI. So to break those down one step at a time, and we could spend way too much time on this slide, but if you think about the data in the digital world, whether it's server data or cookie data or it comes from tags or pixels, I think everyone on this call is going to be familiar with the gaps, the potential biases, the concerns you have to have about the data. Now, I'm not about to say, and I don't mean to say that, all the data is not useful. Of course it's useful. It's being used productively, but it doesn't come with a guarantee, and it needs to be evaluated for its purpose. But the same thing happens when you look at this data of this scale in the offline world as well. So, for example, in the television world, we tend to use set-top box data. More recently, there's smart TV data. And it doesn't come from a representative sample. It doesn't come from a census. So you have the same sort of issues. And you have the same sorts of problems in the magazine world, in the out-of-home world. We don't have radio here, but because we don't have data like this for radio, so it's a complete outage. So there are some serious data issues that need to be resolved. Again, year 2 in a 5-year journey. Maybe we'll solve them in year 3 or year 4. Then you have all these individual data streams that need to be linked together. Sometimes they're done probabilistically, and that introduces noise into the system like any other probabilistic estimate. Sometimes deterministically, you actually have, let's say, addresses or email addresses or things of that sort where you can link the data sets. And even still, there's noise there because even if you have a perfect household match, you don't know the person in the household. And the lack of people in this system is one of those missing elements, missing dimensions that we think is pretty important. There are, again, I'm sure everyone on this call knows, device graphs that are used for matching these things. In our conversations with people throughout the industry, it seems as if there's no one complete solution. People are pulling together 2 and 3 solutions and linking them and sometimes using their own CRM data to try to get a more complete matching across devices because even if you start with great unbiased data, after you go through the matching process, you may have introduced some biases. So there's a number of issues around data matching. Let me come to the 3 more issues that need to be thought about. When attribution was exclusively operating in the digital world, what it was missing was, and I've said this before, the rest of the marketing mix. It's also missing the consumer baseline. If we're thinking about sales, what purchases would have occurred in the absence of marketing? And I think anyone familiar with modeling knows that's a major, major component to the explained variance. And lacking these pieces gives you the risk of misattribution. To make a simple statement, we've seen a number of case studies where digital is really, really efficient and doing well in terms of driving conversion, and television budgets are pulled because they don't seem to be contributing that much. Well, what wasn't understood because of the narrow focus of the modeling was that, in fact, television was contributing to the productivity of digital. And once you pull that support, digital doesn't look quite as good anymore. And that's not an unusual outcome, and it speaks to the need to be able to for the model to have its arms around many other factors. I mean, it could be beyond marketing. It could be things like weather. It could be the economy. It could be competitive, et cetera. Thinking about what we're using the metaphor here as bridge design, what's the nature of the model? We know a lot about advertising. We know a lot about how the dynamics of how advertising works, diminishing returns and ad stocks, long-term effects, et cetera. And the models need to reflect that as well. So the math has got to reflect what we know about the human beings. And then finally, the utility piece, the models need to be linked to the ad tech and the human processes that are actually driving those decisions and leading to more positive outcomes. So again, year 2 in a 5-year journey, a lot that needs to be done. In our view, we've actually made a list, and it's way too long a list to have included here, but we've made a list of issues and challenges and so forth. And, we think, again, the promise is tremendous and the potential is awesome, and we need to galvanize the industry around these issues, around things like common definitions and industry standards and formalizing guidelines and moving the technology forward in a way that will move us further down that 5-year journey. It's not going to happen just by chance, and we're very happy that SIM and the 4As is promising to continue to support our work in this arena. But there's more. There's more that needs to be done, and it can come from industry associations. It can come from academia as well, I'm sure. And we know this is an important for MSI as well. The last thing I really want to say on this topic is, this is science and this is business, and what that means is we need to have industry buy-in. There needs to be industry input, resolution of issues, and the industry needs to take ownership. If this is going to be how business is transacted, that's really important, and it means that the buyers and the sellers of media, the owners of marketing budgets, have to have confidence, and they have to really use these techniques. And part of that in our industry is Media Rating Council audits, and we've been moving nicely in that direction, but it's really important that the audit process give the users of the data confidence. So again, year 2 in a 5-year journey, well, that's not unusual. Bridges aren't built in a day. The Brooklyn Bridge took 13 years in untold lives. The Golden Gate Bridge, a little quicker. California seems to move faster with these things, 4 years. I live near the Tappan Zee Bridge, still in the middle of construction. And, we think that's the ROI bridge is on pace. And we just have to recognize that we're midway through that. And, my final word would just to be, as we're building this bridge, let's look at the future, not the present state, and let's make sure it's big enough. Are we really able to incorporate all of the drivers of consumer behavior, and will that give us an accurate and correct picture of what's moving consumers along their path in order to make sure that we're making the right attributions and the right investment decisions. So that's what I have. And with that, I want to hand this off to Michael. Michael's going to take you through the Convertro point of view and the Convertro solutions. And I think you'll see much of what I just spoke about in a specific application. So Michael, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks, Earl, for inviting us and providing the platform to talk about this stuff. As you saw, Jim gave a broad industry overview of where we are in the journey and what we're attempting to do. I'm hoping to talk a little bit about the actual activation and organization around this data-driven sort of marketing solution and what it requires from a general perspective. And one thing that will be interesting about this presentation is it's a rare occasion that I give a presentation that doesn't have a mathematical equation, so you won't see those today, surprising enough. So basically, I've split my time here into talking about 2 pieces. One is activation, and the other is the organization that needs to support the activation of a data-driven marketing decision solution. And here, this outlines the various pieces that I'll go through and demonstrate what this actually means in practice. But to start things off, I want to introduce the idea of, the method anatomy, I call it. So one thing that comes out of Jim's report is this great sense of confusion and surprise about all of the different methods and scientific jargon that's coming out as possible solutions for the core of the marketing impact analysis, or what we call a marketing impact measurement model. This is something that I think we can put some structure around. So the basic idea here is that we can create an anatomy that includes 3 parts. Those parts are the underlying, economic or psychological model of the consumer in the market, the model of statistical uncertainty, the things that, given the data, we're still uncertain about, and how we characterize the stochastic process and the process that generates the data, and then all of this stuff about big data computation infrastructure. And a lot of the jargon these days seems to be focusing quite heavily around this, because this is what is going to allow us to scale in a data-rich environment. But there is still some sense of confusion about what each method means, whether people are talking about elastic net regression or support vector machines or neural networks. That's probably not where the conversation should start. The conversation should start around, what is the marketer interested in doing in terms of their data-driven solution, and what should be the focus of that. And typically we think of the focus of that as being the consumers themselves and the markets that the marketers are trying to drive their objectives in. So any method, whether somebody realizes or not, can be written down as a model of consumer behavior. Again, the objective here is for the marketer to make decisions about influencing the consumer and the impact of the marketing. So the focus from a statistical perspective is going to be on inference conducted about those what we'd call deep structural parameters that really measure the incremental effects of marketing and things about the marketing environment. So that's always important to ask ourselves when we talk about any solution. Then connecting that to the uncertainty. Is there an interpretation of the uncertainty that links the consumers in the market, and what does that look like? That's where assumptions about the error term and the distributions of the error terms come in, and that it is well understood that these actually link to the consumers that the marketer is looking to influence. They are the ones that are actually generating the data by showing up on the marketing platforms and showing up in stores and retailers and making decisions. So at the core of this is a consumer that is the data generator. Data doesn't come from nowhere, it comes from consumers, and so that's who we're interested in modeling. This is in stark contrast to a perspective where we're interested in just modeling data for the sake of prediction, for the sake of inference about some sort of outcome variable, such as sales alone, and that's a big difference. So we're modeling consumers, we're not modeling data in this particular application of science. So the method's going to live at the core of the platform, but the real meat and potatoes for the marketer in practice is the data-driven scenario planning platform. Right. This is the workflow for how the marketer is going to interact with the platform, interact with a team around the platform, and then actually make decisions as they stand up their data-driven marketing organization. What should come out of this data-driven scenario planning is some financial marketing performance reporting. It's not thought of as some separate part of the process, but as something that should fall out of the scenario planning process, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. So the process is going to look something like this. There is scenario management. The marketer is interested in looking at many possible scenarios. So this is a what-ifs analysis. In academic language, we call these counterfactual analyses, and that is the theme behind what we're doing. So we're going to have a bunch of different scenarios that might be focused on different markets, different times of the year, different campaign strategies, and we need to have an environment where we can manage those and do so in a team way within an organization. The other piece is, once we've clicked into the scenario, that we can configure it in a way that makes sense for the institutional rigidities or constraints that exist for the marketer, things like budget, inventory, shifting marketplace, those sorts of pieces. And then that once you've configured such a scenario, the simulations and what-if analyses can be run, the results can be produced, and you can then drill down into those at a tactical level and think about the tactical mix, how that should be adjusted and deployed, because that links back up to the overall strategic performance of the channel. Having a solution that in that marketing impact measurement model that links those two pieces seamlessly is going to be critical, rather than bringing together two separate ideas like say marketing mix modeling and attribution, and in a post-modeling sort of exercise, bring those things together by adjusting the accounting of the numbers. The foundation should be the underlying consumer model, and we think about aggregating models to get to strategic levels of insight, rather than having two separate pieces or two separate models informing that. So what might this look like in a scenario management capacity? You have a team of marketers or different people that are interacting with the platform, and they're setting up and collaborating on various marketing scenarios, and then submitting them for consideration in a team environment. Once various scenarios are created, the marketer is going to click into those and start to think about how to configure the situation. So, what are the constraints that are put around very specific marketing channels, and then down to specific, creative executions, tactical deployments, placement. All of these sorts of things can be configured within the context of the particular scenario. There can be data that guides the deployment of resources, and from a first order economic efficiency perspective, this of course would be marginal revenue, or the marginal incrementality of each and every dollar you spend or $100 you spend, as this is the most natural way the most natural way to make decisions about where to deploy the dollars, each and every dollar. As you do that, and you've set up a situation, then you're ready to run a simulation that can be oriented towards any of the organization's KPIs. The result is the actual simulation, and this will start to look familiar to a lot of people who've seen some of the outputs that come out of marketing mix modeling studies and the like. One thing that we're reorienting ourselves to here is that this isn't a report that's generated on a quarterly or yearly basis that is prepared with a lot of thought and focus on very specific areas. It's something that you can explore in great depth and answer those wide range of questions that the manager might come up with on the fly, and something that is interacted with on a regular basis. But you'll get information about the overall performance of the different channels, recommendations about what would be optimal in terms of an allocation at a strategic level, and then you can click down into those allocations to see what this means about tactical deployment at a very fine placement creative type of detail, and also get information about the performance in terms of, say, conversions or revenue. And once you have that, this is the natural piece that's going to fall out into the financial reporting component. Right. So one thing that's happening here is that it's not thought of as a separate exercise to think of this as being a historical assessment versus a future planning tool. That's something that I feel we need to disabuse ourselves of, that certain analytics or metrics or perspectives are for historical and some are for future looking. It's all about economic efficiency and how much of the opportunity we're seizing or have seized from our record of the past, and what we will do to become more optimal in the future. But we can think about that as in the same way as what we achieved versus what was possible. The same way your kid comes home from school with a spelling test and tells you, oh, I got 15 right. Your next question is out of how many? This is the same sort of standard that we should assess the historical performance of marketing relative to what the entire opportunity was. Historically, we've only focused on the black bar here and reported what performance was rather than what how efficient we were at achieving the entire opportunity and coming up with a true grade on our performance. So once you've established a foundation for the financial performance, you have a plan that you actually want to enact. The full circle is to actually link this back to some of the platforms where we can make decisions about changing things and actually integrate that into the process. So this is the full loop that we're trying to achieve, and this is bringing about a cultural element in the way that our organization functions, and that's the following perspective, that the exercise of being a data-driven organization is about test and learn, right? This isn't we're going to try to collect all the data, make sure that the data is perfect in some way or as perfect as it can be, estimate a model, and then start using it to make decisions. This is about getting something stood up and then evaluating it, see if it makes sense from a business planning perspective, and make sure that all the gaps are filled, and then improve on it in an iterative way as new data becomes available, as we learn more about the various audiences that we're delivering media against. We update the analysis. This should be done regularly. You need to retrain or recalibrate the model on a weekly basis to make sure that the insights are fresh, rather than estimating one model per year or something like this. The market is continuously adjusting, and having a fresh, relevant model is going to be very important. And then in the context of that, being able to test the recommendations, see how they function in market, evaluate those tests, and then make changes accordingly to the marketing plan. Once we get this sort of test and learn practice in place, and we're building faith within the organization and using a data-driven solution, then you can talk about scaling it. So what does scaling mean? You start with areas where you have a good understanding of what the incrementality of marketing is, and then you start to expand these capabilities across different marketing channels, start to activate more dollars, deploy more dollars against the recommendations, bring more people from the marketing organization and the agency into the fold around this practice of data-driven marketing, and then scale the automation, right? Push the recommendations to the bidding systems and the buying systems in an automated fashion with some managerial oversight. That's the story behind standing it up. The part that I'll go to next is, what does this require for the actual marketing organization? So we start with an overall understanding of who's involved typically. There might be some variation from one company to the next or one vertical to the next, but in general, these are going to be the players around the table. Now, the core players, or what I'd call the three critical stools, the legs of the stool, are the data and analytics stakeholders, the marketing management, and the marketing execution team. The other key piece that's usually part of an organization is data security and solution review board, right? This could be an independent group that sits outside of marketing that's there to give their thumbs up or seal of approval on the solution being adequate. Now, one thing that's important is these are often data scientists that are less oriented towards the practice of marketing science and causal identification of marketing effects, and you might get trapped into questions about how well a model fits from typical metrics like R squared or mean absolute percent error. But again, this isn't the objective. You can always have a model that fits better, but is it the right model for the managerial application? So any sort of evaluation of the metrics should align with what the marketer's objective is, not arbitrary measures of, say, statistical fit. Along the lines of the external players, you have the media agencies. They might be responsible for tagging the media and be responsible for some part of the data. Getting cooperation there is going to be crucial in order to make this work. there's also an opportunity to bring in external consultants and then use that solution vendor to stand up some change management practices that will help the core team act in alignment with one another, that they have consistent incentives, everything from compensation to consistent KPIs. Not all KPIs are going to be in line with each other, and creating that sort of alignment from the top down is critical to getting buy-in and adoption of the solution. So what does the process look like? This aligns a little bit with Jim's notion of year 2 in a 5-year journey. We can talk about the same thing within the context of a particular firm that is that's trying to stand up a solution. It takes time. There shouldn't be an expectation that as soon as you start a solution that it's ready to go and you should get insights right away. As I said, this is going to be not just a large practice in coordinating a bunch of different teams that are going to be contributors to building a data-driven practice, but it's also going to be getting a feel and comfort in the results and adopting it and actually making decisions against that. This takes time. There's not going to be any substitute for time in these cases, and it'll go along the lines of, get the teams ready, spend a lot of time making sure that all the data pieces are in place, and then stand up the process and start to look at the data. The next step is to go through the test, learn, and validate. And then, the final one, you go from Clovis Hunter here to Modern Man, you're taking that practice and you're scaling it to truly become a data-driven marketing organization. Focusing back on the 3 critical legs of the stool here are the data and analytics stakeholders, the financial stakeholders, and then marketing management and execution. They have to be working together in unison according to the same goals and objectives to be able to make this thing work. Without any one of these and these groups wrangling all the other characters on the field, you will not have success in the organization behind backing such a solution. So the one thing that I wanted to reiterate and has been popular practice is to focus so much on contribution and attribution analysis when, as I alluded to from the whole scenario planning framework, that this is really a story about, what is the opportunity, how much of that have I seized, how can I become more efficient, and think about grading ourselves on those terms, and then making decisions according to the financial discipline behind evaluating the marginal value of each dollar spent on marketing. So when we think about the marketing report card that comes out of the marketing organization, it looks something like, the black bar inside the green bar. You've achieved 80% of what was optimal. You get a B-. This is great, and this is what your compensation might be partially valued and based upon. So this is going to take time for people to come around to, but it should be all oriented towards an action-based practice and not just something that says, this is how much my TV spend drove, and then put the report on the shelf and ask for the same amount next year. It's going to be an ongoing practice in changing the marketing mix at a strategic level, and then the tactical deployment at a lower level within the channels. In summary, a strong scientific foundation that is consumer-centric, or whoever your audience is, could be a buying center, something like this, that the managerial question of focus determines what the right solution is. Not notions about what the latest data science technique is, or machine learning technique, or using combinations of techniques is something I've heard of that basically separates itself from the notion of who is the unit of analysis. It's the consumer that we're looking to influence, and that the whole solution and science is built up around this, which has been a major focus of marketing science over the last 40 years. having the right organizational alignment and expertise within that organization, that people are working towards a common goal, that their incentives are aligned, and then finally, building this culture of data-driven decision-making and providing the right incentives within the organization to do that. So that brings me to the conclusion of our presentation. We're open for question and answer.
Great. So thanks very much, Jim and Michael. That was great, and I especially appreciate it, and I think the audience appreciated the move from sort of the big picture, the framework of where things are going. As Jim said, on this particular initiative, year 2 of a 5-year look at where the industry is and where it needs to go, and then Michael, your contributions about the actual practical implications of how you make this work. And I want to start with that and kind of work back to the big picture, maybe have both of you speculate a bit. We've had some calls come in and some questions come in, and I want to pick up some of your comments, Michael, towards the end of the presentation. When you talked about the sequence from the scenario planning to the simulations, counterfactuals, to then the tactical deployment, and that's when you use the term institutional rigidities, I think, one of which was a budget. I thought we've all encountered that. But I'm wondering, is that a kind of a reversal of the usual sequence? It seems to me that a lot of actual practice today is, what is our budget? How do we sort of carve up that pie based on past experience, what our marketing mix model tells us, and then we'll sort of dole out that money and look at the different media we need to use. You're suggesting that the analytics that you have and the analytical engines we have now to analyze this data can actually run multiple scenarios of what if, and then make an informed decision about budgeting instead of working sort of back from the budget to how to apply it. So maybe elaborate a bit more on to what extent that really is a change from conventional thinking. And I guess the important point is, are managers and agencies prepared to deal with that new model? Are they in a position even just to think about it the right way?
Yeah, thanks, Earl, for that question. One thing I'd point out is that this solution is also a way to think about coordinating the marketing organization and these other stakeholders. That means that at the core of the solution, you have a consumer-centric focus, that the underlying model is that, and that the system is built on that, and that when we make decisions or evaluate the performance of decisions, that they're all coming from this consumer-centric model or method. In that, when you make, say, decisions about the strategic allocation of dollars from one channel to the other, those dollars then feed down and are put into the market as very specific tactical executions that then determine what the performance of that channel is, and that feeds back up. So the feedback loop is going up and down in the marketing organization and isn't split up in terms of process, isn't split up in terms of the underlying method or the technology or how people would come to the table around a solution to make these sorts of decisions. So, some things are more rigid in terms of planning, but some things aren't, and really seizing marketing opportunities about what we can do in right time sort of day-to-day planning to make adjustments that earn us those extra dollars or skim the cream off the top.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're towards the end of your presentation, you had that slide up, the little pop-up that we're moving from a model of contribution and attribution to identifying opportunities and efficiency grading, and I think that is a different way of framing it. Jim, I know you've had a lot of practical experience over your career working with people about this. What are some of the maybe challenges you see in getting people to really understand the opportunities that exist here? This is not just another way of measuring the impact of what we've always done. There's really a lot more forward-looking, it seems, and that's a challenge in some ways to how we think about this.
Yeah, absolutely, Earl. And it's interesting because, for this audience, we think about the data issues and we think about the analytical modeling issues. it's the human issues that are really, really the biggest challenges. Our little joke is, we're trying to build cross-platform attribution. Well, that'll be great when we have a cross-platform organization. So think of it in two ways. There's organizational barriers and there's the issue of trust. All right. So starting with the barriers. The thing about what Michael was saying, that one of the bigger problems is it's well, put it this way, it's easier to optimize within a budget. So you have a budget owner, and they want to get the most out of that money. They want to get the most productivity out of that money, and that's doable. The minute the optimization says, okay, take money from this pot to that pot, meaning, let's say, from this function within the marketing organization, or worse, from this agency to that agency, try to move money from digital to television. That can be really challenging because they're different companies, and they'll guard against that and defend their budget to the end. So, the organizational structure is a real challenge. Back in the earlier days of mixed modeling, we did some best practices work around organizational structure, and one of the things we identified was really, really simple: having in the marketing organization, within the advertiser, having a cross-functional team, so that on a regular basis, the TV guy and the print guy and the consumer promotion guy and the trade promotion guy and the logistics guy, they all sat down and they looked at results and they considered options. So that was one way to try to optimize it. So that's the organizational issue. Then I said there's the trust issue. And that's where, Michael's emphasis on test and learn is something we hear about a lot from, some of the modelers that we really, really respect and hold in high regard. It's really important because the model will say something, and there are people who've had experience and have learned to trust those outcomes. And, even when you trust them, that it's a model and it's math and there's a range around those results. So, you need to even there have some perspective on that. But for everyone, if you can then take that result and implement it on a small scale, and in an attribution setting, if you can do that and read it quickly so that you can actually act on the outcome, it's not like, ancient history where you run a test market for a year. If you can put something in market and empirically test it, not model it, that's a great way to build confidence.
That's great. Thanks, Jim. That actually addresses one of the questions that Kirk had about, you sort of touched on it, the politics involved in these decisions. And I think that's an important point as well, because as Michael also said, no matter how good your models are, you really need to align with the organization, the strategic issues, and make this new technology, these new abilities we have, align with the organization in ways that are effective. I mean, just modeling for modeling's sake isn't going to get you there. But let me ask you if that also raises a question around, you mentioned the need to align with the KPIs of the organization. From your experience, for either of you, are there perhaps new KPIs or new ways of measuring or thinking about what we're doing that aren't there? I mean, you say customer loyalty is our KPI. Well, all right, you can always build a link from your attribution models to loyalty and so forth, but maybe there are other types of metrics that are becoming available that we need to think about and not just try to fit this new technology and approach into the existing structure of measurement. So your thoughts about that?
So, some of the common KPIs that we see in organizations, in addition to the standard conversion and revenue-based KPIs that finance is more interested in, are groups that are managing towards things like brand health metrics and awareness and these sorts of things. These are important to look at, especially I see Todd's question here about being long versus short-term focused. Having the right mix of KPIs that we then orchestrate a marketing plan that is driving short-term conversions, driving people through the bottom of the funnel, but having a modeling solution that is capturing long-term components in at least as good of a way as marketing mix modeling has, and there's been advancements there. But just keeping an eye on all the different metrics, and the experience manager is going to have a sense of what this means from a longer-term perspective about maintaining the brand and overall awareness as as maybe some of the digital marketing efforts are focused on those quicker conversions. Alas, the solution needs to capture all these things, and then we also need to acknowledge to what extent an impact measurement or assessment is focusing on this more immediate opportunity that we're seizing versus the efforts that need to be made to continue building brand.
I'm glad you mentioned that and got to Todd's question because, again, traditionally, you both started off by saying this, the metrics are rearward-looking that's kind of measuring the effectiveness of what we've already done and how it maybe helps us achieve our goal. But with this ability to do the scenario planning, the what-if simulations and so forth, I think some of the metrics have to be a lot more long-term and more forward-looking. What could we contribute to unexplored opportunities by doing these models and analyses? And that leads me to another set of questions, which relate to, we've been, for obvious reasons, focusing on kind of managing and understanding the media world and how you deploy resources across different channels and attribution. But as we all know, that's only one part of the overall marketing mix. Our former executive director, Mike Hansons at UCLA, says, everybody worries about the 0.01 elasticities for advertising, and they ignore that in some cases, if you're the right kind of business, you get a 0.1 elasticity for Salesforce enhancement or something. So there are other elements of the marketing mix that could, in theory, be included and managed along the lines you've described, but maybe the data is not as robust in there and the time cycle is longer. But your thoughts about expanding this model to learning more about the other elements of the marketing mix and managing those more proactively the way you described?
Yeah, Earl, if I can jump on that one, we've actually done some work with some clients recently in seeing exactly that. And it's funny because going back to your KPI question, my thought was it's not so much new KPIs, it's coordinating among them and broadening the set of KPIs, and long-term and short-term, being one that stands repeating. It's done so infrequently, but the ability to look at, as you build brand value, as you build demand, as you build preference and consideration, and then harvesting and getting those linked in the modeling. But then going beyond that, and as you said, right, the marketing budget actually in the organization is not the biggest. It's not the biggest thing. It's where we tend to focus, but Salesforce is huge, and if you think, for example, in the pharmaceutical industry, it is bigger than huge, whatever that word is exactly. And it's not impossible. We've seen it done. The data doesn't come from the standard sources, but they have data. Or in a retail-focused industry where they have data on store performance and manager performance and even salesperson performance. They do collect. Companies do collect a lot of data. It can be hard to uncover it. It may be in places you're not expecting to look, but it's entirely possible to pull it in and make it part of the make the modeling enterprise broader and look at optimizing things beyond media, beyond promotion, to optimizing more of the customer-facing aspects of the business.
Yeah, Michael, did you want to add to that?
I think that's pretty thorough. I mean, sorry, I have a noisy radiator in my office here, so I apologize for that if you hear loud noises. There isn't something crazy going on here. If we start with a framework, and if you look at a lot of the marketing science papers over the last 20, 30 years, they're looking at the consumer-centric framework, and they're starting any of their problems by asking, what is the influence on the consumer of any given element of the marketing mix. This is the sort of generality, I think, that our orientation towards the solution requires, to understand that, hey, we can include these things. And as data availability comes better, especially I think about our B2B clients where, they're talking more about buying centers and longer lead cycles and stuff like this, that, incorporating some of these dynamics into that same framework is something that has been well guided by a lot of the research in marketing science, and that's what's going to make the general solution retrofittable for specific business problems.
That's right. I want to come back to one last question then, and that's a little bit more speculative, but it's an issue we're hearing about. And that is, and this came up, as you know, Michael, when you presented for us at the NYU conference February of last year, the whole issue around programmatic buying, the automating of not just media buying, but other elements of the marketing process can be automated now, and probably should be. But I guess the question is where you draw the line, because it seems like there is a danger potentially that because we can sort of correct mid-course and manage on the fly and do these feedback loops that would adjust our activities almost on a daily basis, that if anything, that's going to force us towards a more short-term thinking and take out that sort of interpretive human element that you described, Michael, that's part of this process. It's not purely about automation and computing power. It's about judgment being informed by this process. And I just want to give both of you a last chance to talk a little more broadly about the role of automation and some of these technologies vis-a-vis decision making. How much of the human element still needs to be there? How much of it should perhaps be automated and take some of the cognitive load off the managers?
I would say that this is a big issue for measurement confound, right? Like, as we get better at targeting and stuff like this, these create measurement confounds that, if I can hit those people that are more responsive, then my responsiveness metrics will be biased upward, and I'll keep throwing money at that. Meanwhile, something else is getting underfunded that's part of, creating the entire brand and customer experience. I think having an eye on these sorts of problems, continuing, again, to test and learn, and this might also mean, having the right amount of random control tests to control for this sort of, these what we call endogeneity issues, is critical. And then also making sure that the model does capture the importance and that the objectives, the managerial and marketing objectives, are oriented towards some of this longer-term, longer-focused planning. So having the right structural framework for management, and then being very cognizant of the measurement confounds that arise from hyper-precise targeting.
Great. And Jim, we've got about a minute left, so I'll give you the last 30 seconds or so before we wrap up.
Great, thank you, Earl. So, quickly, I think automation is really critical. If the analytics are going to drive decision making in the, again, air quotes, moment, then they need to be quick, and so that requires automation. The thing that does worry me about that is, the automation's got to be comprehensive. There are things that the human eye will catch that you may or may not catch in an automated system. I'm a little skeptical. As much as I like test and learn, it's got to be looked at a bit, through a human lens. I'm a bit skeptical of randomized control testing because I'm never sure if it's really random and is everything really in control. I've had too many years of test marketing that goes badly. It's a challenge. It's got to go fast. It's got to be automated. We got to get it right.
I want to thanks Jim. I was on mute. Sorry about that. I want to thank you both for a great presentation. If there were questions and thoughts that occurred to people and you didn't have a chance to get those to Jim or Michael, the information and their contact information, emails are on the chat function now they're seeing. Okay, great. And I want to remind the audience and invite you to join us on Thursday, April 13th for Innovation Equity, how to combine demand forecasting and customer management principles to determine what an innovation is really worth, featuring Ellie Ofek, at Harvard University. And as always, many thanks to the members of the MSI audience for participating in our member-to-member webinar series.